Silence is not the absence of communication. It is a different language, one that speaks from a place deeper than words can reach. When a man becomes silent, it is often mistaken for distance, indifference, or lack of care. But beneath that quiet exterior lies a storm of unspoken thoughts, battles, and emotions he has yet to learn how to translate. A man's silence is not his weakness, it is his form of strength, his way of processing what cannot yet be spoken. Since childhood, most men are conditioned to internalize rather than externalize. When they are young, they hear phrases like, "Don't cry," "Be strong," or "Handle it," and "Real men don't talk about their feelings." Slowly, expression becomes a private act rather than a public one. They learn to build walls of composure, not because they want to hide, but because that is how they were taught to survive. So when silence appears, it's not emptiness, it's the echo of years of restraint. In a man's world, silence becomes his form of reflection. When something troubles him, his instinct is not to speak immediately, but to retreat within. He needs to understand before he shares, to find balance before he explains. His quiet is the workshop where he rebuilds himself. To interrupt that silence with demands for words can sometimes feel like stepping into a sacred space uninvited. Because for him, stillness is not avoidance. It is a form of meditation, a way to maintain control when his emotions rise too high. Many women mistake this quiet for emotional distance. They assume his lack of words means a lack of care, a lack of love, a lack of interest. But that assumption comes from misunderstanding the masculine rhythm. Men and women process emotions differently. Where women often heal through dialogue, men often heal through solitude. Silence is how they sort chaos into clarity. It's not that he doesn't want to talk. It's that he wants to bring you something coherent, not fragmented. Imagine a river after heavy rain, muddy, loud, overflowing. That is how a man feels when conflict or confusion strikes. His silence is like the calm that follows when the water slowly clears. When he withdraws, he's trying to see through the murk of his own thoughts. If you can wait with patience, you'll notice that when he returns, he speaks with calm direction and understanding. But if pushed to explain before the storm inside him settles, he will either shut down further or speak from confusion rather than clarity. A man's silence is also his way of protecting what he loves. Sometimes he doesn't speak because he knows that words said in heat can cause damage that silence cannot. He may not have been taught how to express tenderness, fear, or doubt in ways that feel natural. So instead of speaking, he chooses restraint. It's not that he feels nothing, it's that he feels too much and fears that his words will not do justice to what he feels. In his silence, he preserves the bond rather than risks breaking it. In his quiet moments, he reflects on purpose, responsibility, and direction. For a man, love is not only about feeling, it's about building, providing, protecting, leading. These roles weigh heavily, often in ways unseen. Silence gives him space to gather his strength, to think through his next move, to restore his sense of inner order. He may not articulate this process, but it is happening every time he retreats into thought. When he sits in stillness, he is not turning away, he is turning inward. Understanding this is not about tolerating neglect, but about seeing through different eyes. Silence is not a punishment or withdrawal, it is an emotional recalibration. The energy that women often release through talking, men release through thinking. They analyze the situation, look for logic, search for solutions. Their silence is often the gap between emotion and action, a bridge they are building quietly inside themselves. If you listen closely to a man's silence, you begin to hear his truth. It's in the way he sits with you even when he says nothing, the way he looks but doesn't explain, the way he keeps showing up though words never leave his lips. These are his expressions, subtle, consistent, and deep. His silence is filled with messages, patience, consideration, self-control. To understand it, you must learn to read energy instead of sound, presence instead of speech. In relationships, this difference often becomes a point of conflict. One person seeks verbal reassurance, while the other seeks quiet understanding. But peace begins when we stop trying to make others communicate like us. When you stop demanding words from silence, you begin to feel its power. It holds the essence of his emotion. Concentrated, disciplined, and real. If he allows you close enough to share that space without speaking, it means he trusts you deeply. A man's silence also carries the wisdom of observation. While he may not respond quickly, he is always noticing. He watches your reactions, your tone, your energy. He studies the world before acting. This observation is how he learns, adapts, and protects. He does not rush to express because he knows that words, once released, cannot be taken back. His quiet is a safeguard for himself and for others. When you begin to honor a man's silence instead of fearing it, something beautiful happens. Communication deepens, not through words but through understanding. You begin to sense his moods through subtle shifts, his thoughts through energy, his emotions through presence. This is where connection becomes sacred, where both word and silence coexist in balance. The man who chooses silence is not empty, he is full. Full of thoughts he cannot yet name, emotions he is still shaping, meanings he is still discovering. His silence is not avoidance, it is awareness in progress. It is where he reclaims his strength before he shares it with the world. To those who learn to listen beyond the noise, his silence speaks volumes. To understand the heart of a man, one must look beyond his words and beyond his gestures. The essence of what drives him, what inspires him, and what sustains his connection to others, especially to the woman he loves, is not validation. It is respect. Validation is fleeting, like a spark that fades after it burns. Respect, however, is the flame that endures. It reaches deeper than compliments or praise. It nourishes his spirit, it reminds him of his worth, and it anchors his desire in something real and lasting. A man's soul thrives in an environment where he feels trusted, valued, and respected. It is not that he doesn't appreciate admiration. He does. But admiration without respect feels hollow. Many men can sense the difference immediately. Validation is about ego. Respect is about essence. When a woman validates, she acknowledges what he does. When she respects, she acknowledges who he is. That distinction is everything. From a young age, men are shaped by their relationship with respect. Their sense of identity often comes from how they are seen in the world, whether by their family, their peers, or society. They are taught to achieve, to win, to provide, to be strong. But beneath that conditioning lies a simple truth. Every man longs to be seen not just for his achievements, but for his effort, for his intent, for his integrity. Respect touches the part of him that tries even when no one notices, that sacrifices quietly, that keeps going even when he is tired. When a man feels respected by a woman, it ignites something within him that no external validation can. It awakens his natural drive to protect, to commit, to build, to give. Respect gives him direction. It reminds him that his presence matters. It is through respect that he feels safe to be strong and soft at the same time. Because respect does not challenge his masculinity. It strengthens it. It tells him, I trust your judgment. I see your effort. I believe in your ability. These are not mere words. They are nourishment to his inner world. Validation, on the other hand, often operates on the surface. It soothes his ego, but it does not reach his soul. Compliments on his looks, his achievements, or his possessions make him feel appreciated, but they do not make him feel understood. A man can receive endless praise and still feel unseen. But when he feels respected, even in silence, he finds grounding. Respect doesn't flatter, it steadies. It does not inflate him with pride, but fills him with purpose. Respect also shapes the way a man loves. When he is respected, his affection becomes deeper, more consistent, more protective. He gives without hesitation because he feels trusted. When a woman believes in him, even when he doubts himself, her respect becomes the wind beneath his discipline. It reminds him that he is capable, that his efforts are meaningful. Her respect becomes the space where he can be both the warrior and the man who lays down his armor. But respect is not blind admiration. It does not mean agreement with everything he says or does. True respect comes from understanding, not obedience. It means recognizing his humanity, his struggles, his imperfections, his efforts. It is looking at him through the eyes of patience, not judgment. When he fails, respect says, you are still worthy. When he succeeds, respect says, I am proud, not because you achieved, but because you stayed true. In relationships, many women believe that love and validation are enough to keep a man close. But a man may love deeply and still drift away if he feels disrespected. Love feeds emotion, but respect feeds identity. When a man feels constantly criticized, corrected, or doubted, something inside him begins to close. His energy withdraws, his passion dims, he stops expressing his ideas, his plans, his emotions, not because he doesn't care, but because he feels that his essence is no longer valued. He starts living cautiously, no longer from passion but from fear of being diminished. Conversely, when a man feels respected, even in disagreement he opens. Respect invites honesty. He shares more of himself, his dreams, his worries, his truth. He doesn't have to perform or prove. He feels safe enough to be authentic. And from that authenticity, desire grows naturally, not from lust, but from admiration, connection, and peace. A man who feels respected by his partner finds her presence healing. She becomes not a mirror for his ego, but a home for his spirit. Respect also creates a unique kind of attraction. It is the energy that deepens intimacy beyond physicality. When a man feels that his opinions are valued, his choices appreciated, his boundaries understood, he feels magnetically drawn to the one who gives him that respect. It is not manipulation, it is harmony. It tells him that he can be fully himself without defense. That freedom awakens his desire, not the shallow desire to conquer, but the sacred desire to connect. To respect a man is not to worship him. It is to recognize the battles he fights silently, the burdens he carries without complaint, the self-control he practices daily. It is to look at him and see not just what he shows the world, but the quiet strength underneath. Respect listens when he has no words. It believes in him when he hesitates. It honors the way he expresses care, even if it looks different from how others do. In truth, respect is the love language most men never learn to ask for. They seek it not through words, but through the way they are treated. They sense it in tone, in patience, in trust. And when they find it, they give everything in return. Loyalty, consistency, and devotion. Because respect is not just about admiration, it's about alignment. It says, I see you as you are, and I stand with you. That message, more than any validation, fuels his passion, his ambition, and his love. Validation tells him he is good enough for a moment. Respect reminds him he has always been enough. Validation fades with time. Respect deepens with understanding. Validation touches the surface. Respect reaches the soul. And for a man whose heart beats not for attention but for meaning, respect is what keeps that heartbeat steady. A man's instinct to protect runs deep. It is written into his nature, not as a performance, but as a quiet calling that shapes the way he loves, leads, and connects. Yet beneath that instinct lies a paradox that few understand. A man does not protect what is fragile. He protects what allows him to be fragile. He guards most fiercely the space where he feels safe enough to lower his armor. His protection is not only physical, it is emotional, spiritual, and unseen. When he feels safe to be vulnerable, he becomes a guardian, not because he is told to, but because his soul chooses to. For most of his life, a man is trained to wear a mask of strength. He learns that emotions can be dangerous, that softness invites judgment, that vulnerability is weakness. So he builds layers around his heart, layers of logic, work, silence, and control. These layers become his armor against disappointment and misunderstanding. He navigates the world through competence, performance, and resilience. But beneath all of that, there exists a deep longing, the desire to be seen without fear, to be accepted without condition, to rest in a space where he does not have to prove anything. When a man meets someone who offers that kind of space, a calm that does not demand, a presence that listens without fixing, a love that accepts without controlling, something shifts inside him. His defenses begin to soften. Slowly, he begins to reveal pieces of his inner world, testing the safety of that connection. At first, it might come through small admissions, subtle openness, or silent gestures of trust. If he feels safe enough, the walls lower further. And as his vulnerability grows, so does his instinct to protect the one who made it possible. Because for a man, vulnerability is not casual, it is sacred. It is not something he shares easily or often. To open his heart is to expose his deepest fears, insecurities, and emotions that he himself may not fully understand. So when he finds someone who receives that part of him with gentleness, he feels something profound: loyalty. He begins to protect not only the person but also the bond that made him feel safe. His protection becomes a form of gratitude. His way of saying, "You saw me when I was unguarded, and I trust you with what I usually hide." This is why a man's love is quiet but solid. He doesn't always say he cares in words, but he shows it in the way he shields the relationship from harm, the way he becomes mindful of your peace, the way he guards your energy when others try to disturb it. His protectiveness is not dominance, it is devotion. It's the reflection of how much safety he feels in your presence. The more you make him feel emotionally secure, the more he becomes protective, not out of fear, but out of reverence for the space you share. However, when that sense of safety is broken, when his vulnerability is used against him, mocked or dismissed, he retreats into silence again. The wall rises higher, the armor grows thicker. He may not argue, he may not explain, but the door to his inner world quietly closes. Because a man who feels unsafe emotionally will protect himself before he protects anyone else. His instinct for self-preservation activates the moment he senses that his openness has become a weapon used against him. Once that trust is damaged, his protectiveness becomes guarded, not because he stops caring, but because he no longer feels safe to care openly. It takes time for a man to learn that vulnerability and strength can coexist. The world often tells him they cannot, so he hides the most sensitive parts of himself, his fears of failure, his doubts, his dreams that seem too big to voice. He buries them beneath action and composure. Yet, when he feels accepted as he is, without the expectation to always be perfect, something transforms inside him. Vulnerability becomes his strength, not his weakness. And in return, he becomes fiercely protective of that rare environment where he can exist authentically. He protects the person who sees the man beneath the mask. He protects the woman who listens to his silence without demanding words. He protects the relationship that feels like refuge from the noise of the world. His protection becomes an extension of his gratitude, a sacred exchange between strength and softness. He may not express it through constant affection, but through consistency, responsibility, and presence. These are his ways of saying, "This connection matters to me more than comfort or ego." There is a tenderness in how men protect what gives them peace. It's in the way he checks on you quietly, not out of suspicion but out of care. It's in the way he worries about your safety when he's not around, or the way he adjusts his plans to make sure you're okay. These gestures may seem small, but for him, they carry deep meaning. Protectiveness, when it arises from emotional safety, is love translated into action. It's not about control or ownership. It's about preservation of something sacred. When a man feels truly safe with someone, his guard drops not because he stops being strong, but because he no longer has to prove his strength. He allows himself to cry, to fail, to ask for help, to express fear. These are moments he rarely shows the world. The one who sees these sides of him becomes part of his inner circle, a place he will guard with loyalty and quiet devotion. His instinct to protect then expands beyond the physical. It includes protecting emotional peace, protecting trust, protecting truth. He knows how hard it is to find a space where he can be both the protector and the protected. So when he finds it, he honors it by standing guard over it. He will distance himself from anyone who threatens that peace. He will prioritize that connection over temporary pleasure or distraction. To him, that bond becomes sacred ground, a reminder that love does not weaken him but completes him. And in that completion, his vulnerability becomes his greatest power, and his protectiveness becomes the language of his love. A man's emotions often do not travel through words, they move through his actions. Where some people express with speech, he expresses through doing. His care is found in his effort, his love is hidden in his consistency, and his devotion is written into the things he does quietly, without announcing them. To understand a man deeply is to learn how to read his movements, not his vocabulary. Because for him, action is not separate from emotion. It is emotion translated into motion, discipline, and service. Most men grow up in an emotional culture of restraint. They are taught that expressing too much makes them weak, that being too open makes them vulnerable to misunderstanding. So they learn to replace language with labor, to show rather than to say. When he fixes something for you, checks on you, remembers what you like, or stands by your side in silence, these are not random gestures. These are his emotions materializing into behavior. What he cannot easily say, he demonstrates. To him, love is not about what he promises, but about what he consistently delivers. Words are easy, they require no risk. Actions, however, require commitment. They involve time, energy, and attention, things he values because they represent investment. So, when he gives these to you, when he rearranges his schedule to make time, when he sacrifices sleep to listen, when he worries about your safety, that is how he says, "I love you," without words. His actions are not habits of obligation. They are extensions of feeling that move through him in quiet, deliberate ways. but many misunderstand this form of emotional expression. They expect men to communicate affection through constant verbal reassurance. Yet, while some men can do this, most express through different languages. He might not say, "I miss you," but you'll notice he checks in more often. He might not say, "I care about you," but he makes sure you got home safely. He might not say, "I love you" every day, but he will protect, provide, fix, and build, because for him, emotions demand evidence, not just expression. A man's emotions live in the details of his behavior. They are in the way he looks at you when you're speaking, in the way he pays attention to what you don't say, in the way he remembers small things you thought he'd forget. His love language might not be poetry, it might be service. It might be showing up when he's tired, working hard to make life easier, or quietly solving problems before they reach you. Every act carries emotion, quiet but heavy, reserved but sincere. Even his distance sometimes speaks. When he pulls away, it might not mean indifference. Often, it means he is overwhelmed by feelings he doesn't know how to name. His silence after an argument, his retreat into thought, these are also his emotions in motion, turning inward to process what he feels. Men often carry emotions like weight, heavy, internal, unshared. But even when he is quiet, he is still moving through feeling, still expressing through the rhythm of his choices. You can tell what a man feels not by what he says when he's comfortable, but by what he does when things are difficult. When he stays present during conflict instead of walking away. When he apologizes even though it's hard. When he listens even in anger. These actions reveal love that runs deeper than words. When he helps you without you asking. When he shows up even when it's inconvenient. When he protects your peace even when he's hurting. Those are his emotions alive in movement. A man's love often looks like responsibility. He may not write it in letters, but he carries it in the way he takes care of what matters to him. If you listen closely, his actions will tell you his priorities, the things he makes time for, the people he defends, the commitments he keeps. These all reveal what he values most. Love to him is not about constant expression. It's about quiet preservation. It's about showing up, building, maintaining, protecting. All ways of saying, "You matter," without the noise of words. For many men, speaking openly about emotions can feel unnatural, not because they lack depth, but because they were never given the tools to translate feeling into language. They speak in doing, not in describing. They show concern by solving problems. They show appreciation by contributing. They show regret by changing behavior. Every choice, every movement, every sacrifice becomes a sentence in the emotional language of action. If you want to know what a man feels, observe him closely when no one is watching. Notice the small things, the way he adjusts your seatbelt, the way he pays attention when you're quiet, the way he shoulders responsibilities without complaint. These are his emotional signatures. They are not random habits, but intentional acts of love expressed through movement and attention. When he works hard to create stability, it's not because he's obsessed with control. It's because stability is how he loves. When he plans for the future, it's not because he fears loss. It's because planning is how he protects. When he teaches, helps, builds, or provides, he is channeling his emotions into creation. His actions become his legacy of love. They say what he cannot: "I am here, I care, I choose you." Even in moments of conflict, his actions speak. His tone, his restraint, his effort to understand before reacting. These two are emotions at work. A man's self-control is not indifference, it is emotional discipline. It is love that refuses to destroy what it values, even in the heat of anger. This too is emotion in motion, the quiet choice to protect rather than to prove. When a man acts, he is speaking through behavior that has meaning to him. It may not match the romantic expressions that society glorifies, but it holds a purity of intention that runs deep. His actions are his emotional blueprint, the map of what he feels, fears, and values. To understand him, you must listen with your eyes, not just your ears. You must feel the sincerity in his consistency, not just the sweetness in his speech. A man's emotions are not absent, they are embodied. Every act of effort, every moment of patience, every gesture of care is an emotion moving through his hands, his choices, his presence. His love doesn't always come dressed in words. It comes in reliability, in protection, in time given freely, in quiet sacrifices never mentioned. His emotions live not in conversation, but in commitment, not in declarations, but in devotion, not in promises, but in proof. But perfection is loud. It strives, it performs, it demands to be seen. Peace, however, is silent. It soothes, it invites, it allows. And it is peace, not perfection, that truly captures a man's heart. A man may be momentarily drawn to beauty, impressed by achievement, or fascinated by charm, but what makes him stay, what makes him fall deeply, quietly, and faithfully is peace. It is the feeling of calm that greets him when he is near you, the stillness that allows his mind to rest, the quiet energy that makes his heart unclench. He does not fall for the woman who dazzles the world, he falls for the one who makes the world quiet. A man's life, especially in modern times, is full of pressure. The need to succeed, to perform, to lead, to provide, all weigh heavily on his shoulders. The world constantly demands his strength, his logic, his endurance. Every day he wears a mental armor, not because he wants to, but because the world rarely offers him space to simply be. So when he meets someone whose presence feels like an exhale, who brings softness without judgment, understanding without interrogation, something deep inside him begins to relax. That is when love begins to root itself, not through attraction, but through peace. Peace to a man is safety, emotional safety, spiritual calm, and mental quiet. It is not found in perfection, because perfection creates tension. Perfection seeks to impress, to perform, to maintain control. But peace asks for nothing. Peace accepts, peace listens. Peace does not compete with him, it complements him. It allows him to exist without constantly proving his worth. And in that freedom, he finds love. For a man, peace feels like coming home after years of battle. Not a place of escape, but a place of return. Many women believe they must be flawless to be loved, beautiful enough, successful enough, interesting enough. But men do not fall in love with enough. They fall in love with ease, when he can be around you and feel no need to defend, to explain, to filter his words, or to pretend to be more than he is. He feels peace. When you understand his silence instead of fearing it, when you respect his need for solitude without taking it personally, when you bring harmony instead of chaos, he feels something he rarely feels anywhere else: rest. A peaceful woman is not one without passion. She is one who carries stillness within her passion. Her energy doesn't drain, it nourishes. She doesn't use words to control, she uses presence to calm. She does not demand that a man always speak or perform, she gives him the space to exist quietly beside her. She knows that love is not built in noise but in awareness. Her strength is not in perfection but in patience. Her love does not shout, it steadies. It does not seek to prove, it simply is. When a man feels that kind of energy, his defenses begin to fall away. He starts to open up, to share, to trust, because peace is the key that unlocks his vulnerability. He may admire perfection, but he only trusts peace. A man cannot feel safe where he feels judged. He cannot feel love where he feels corrected. He cannot relax where everything is measured. But in peace, he breathes differently. He moves differently. He begins to bring more of himself, his thoughts, his emotions, his dreams, into that space because it does not demand, it welcomes. Peace doesn't mean the absence of passion or challenge, it means balance. It's not about never arguing. It's about arguing without destruction. It's not about never disagreeing. It's about disagreeing without disrespect. It's not about pretending everything is fine. It's about handling things calmly, without turning love into a battlefield. Men crave that balance because the world outside rarely gives it to them. They want a connection that feels like still water. Deep, stable, reflective. Perfection may be admired from afar, but peace is what he wants to come home to. He doesn't need constant stimulation, he needs grounding. He doesn't need a flawless companion, he needs an honest one. He doesn't fall in love with beauty that tries too hard. He falls in love with energy that feels natural. The more peace he feels in your presence, the more love he gives in return. Because peace does not drain him, it restores him. The irony is that peace often looks simple, but it's rare. It's rare because it requires emotional maturity, restraint, and deep self-awareness. It takes strength to stay calm when others react, to listen instead of lecture, to give space instead of control. A peaceful woman has learned that power doesn't come from dominance, it comes from balance. She is not afraid of quiet, she embodies it. She doesn't chase, she attracts. Her energy says, you can rest here. And that energy becomes irresistible. When a man finds peace in someone, it transforms his entire world. He starts making better decisions. He becomes more focused, more protective, more consistent. He feels proud, not pressured. He finds meaning, not distraction. Because peace doesn't just comfort him. It builds him. It gives him clarity, direction, and a sense of inner strength. In that kind of love, he becomes more himself, not less. That is the kind of bond he will never want to lose. Perfection, by contrast, often creates distance. It exhausts both people because it demands constant upkeep. It turns love into performance. But peace is effortless. It requires no pretending, no proving. It simply exists between two people who know how to honor each other's inner worlds. Peace is not about being passive. It's about being stable. It's not about suppressing emotions. It's about mastering them. And this mastery, this inner stillness, is what draws a man closer than anything else ever could. He may be drawn to the woman who looks perfect, but he stays with the one who feels peaceful. Because peace is nourishment, it's emotional oxygen. It allows him to lay down his armor, to be human, to be vulnerable without fear. In peace, he finds connection that transcends attraction. It is not intensity that keeps him. It is serenity. It is not perfection that moves him. It is presence. It is not drama that engages him. It is depth. Peace is what lets him love without resistance, give without calculation, and stay without hesitation. There is a quiet pain that many men carry, not always visible, not always spoken, but deeply felt. It is not the fear of rejection that shapes them the most. It is the fear of being misunderstood. Rejection is something they can endure. They can accept a no. They can handle distance. They can survive loss. But to be misunderstood, to be seen in a way that does not reflect their truth, cuts deeper than almost anything else. Because misunderstanding distorts identity. It erases intention. It leaves a man standing in the middle of his own silence, wondering how something so genuine could be so wrongly perceived. From the time he is young, a man learns to hide complexity behind simplicity. The world rewards his logic, his discipline, his results, but not his vulnerability. When he tries to explain his feelings, they are often dismissed as weakness or confusion. When he expresses anger, it's called aggression. When he withdraws, it's labeled indifference. Slowly, he learns that whatever he feels will be interpreted through someone else's lens, not his own. So he builds walls, not to keep people out, but to protect the truth inside him from being twisted by misunderstanding. This fear follows him into his relationships, his work, his friendships. When he hesitates to speak, it's not always because he has nothing to say. It's because he's calculating whether his words will be received as he intends them. When he chooses silence, it's often because he knows that his emotions, if misread, can be used against him. His quiet is not avoidance, it's preservation. Because few things hurt a man more than opening up from an honest place and then being told he meant something entirely different. Being misunderstood leaves a man feeling invisible even when he's standing right in front of you. It makes him question whether communication is even worth the risk. He wonders if his intentions will ever be seen clearly or if his efforts will always be lost in translation. He stops explaining himself not because he no longer cares, but because the act of explaining has become a battlefield. Every word feels like a gamble. One wrong phrase and his meaning disappears behind assumption. So, he retreats to the only place he feels safe: silence. Many men carry emotions that are unspoken because they were once punished for showing them. They've been told they are too cold, too detached, too logical. But when they tried to show softness, they were told they were too emotional. This contradiction creates confusion. How can he be both? How can he express freely when every expression risks being misunderstood? So he learns to communicate through action instead of language. He works harder, stays loyal, protects what he loves, hoping that what he does will speak more clearly than what he says. Yet even then, his actions are sometimes doubted, his motives questioned. That doubt pierces him deeper than any outright rejection ever could. A man's deepest fear of being misunderstood is rooted in his longing to be seen as he truly is. To be understood is to be known, not through the filters of stereotype or expectation, but through truth. He doesn't want to be idolized, nor does he want to be analyzed. He simply wants to be recognized for the sincerity behind his effort. He wants someone to notice that his silence holds thought, that his calm hides emotion, that his steadiness is a form of care. When someone misreads that silence as indifference, or his calmest detachment, it creates a quiet wound he rarely speaks of. Misunderstanding is not just about communication, it is about connection. When a man feels misunderstood, he feels disconnected from the person who means the most to him. It is not the disagreement that hurts him. It's the misinterpretation of his heart. To love someone and still be seen as distant, to try and still be told he isn't doing enough. That contradiction eats away at his sense of value. Over time, it teaches him to stay guarded. It convinces him that it's safer to be alone in clarity than together in confusion. When a man is truly understood, his entire energy changes. His tone softens, his eyes open, his shoulders drop. He begins to trust again. He begins to share more freely because he no longer fears that his words will turn into weapons. To be understood gives him the courage to be vulnerable. It allows him to put his armor down and speak from his heart instead of his logic. That kind of understanding doesn't require constant agreement. It requires presence. It means listening beyond the words, sensing intention before reacting to language. Many women misunderstand men, not because they lack empathy, but because they expect communication to mirror their own. But men often speak a different emotional language, one of effort, rhythm, and energy. He shows care through consistency, not conversation. He expresses regret through change, not apology. He communicates love through responsibility, not poetry. When this language goes unrecognized, he feels unseen. And that feeling, being unseen while standing in the light, is what creates his deepest fear. A man fears misunderstanding because it makes him feel powerless over how he is perceived. He can control his actions but not their interpretation. He can speak with truth but still be met with accusation. That helplessness is unbearable. It makes him cautious, careful, measured. He begins to limit how much of himself he shows because every layer revealed is another chance to be misread. Over time, this restraint can make him appear distant, but beneath it lies a man who simply wants to be understood once, deeply, accurately, without distortion. The need to be understood is not vanity, it's survival. Understanding tells him he is safe to express, safe to exist in his natural state. It tells him that his emotions won't be twisted into something they're not. It tells him that he doesn't have to constantly defend his humanity. When a man feels understood, he stops trying to prove himself. He becomes gentle. He listens more. He trusts more. Because he no longer feels the need to be on guard. This is why misunderstanding hurts him more than rejection ever could. Rejection tells him, you are not chosen. Misunderstanding tells him, you are not seen. One he can recover from, the other he carries quietly for years. It's the invisible scar that shapes how he communicates, how he trusts, and how he loves. The man who has been misunderstood too many times learns to keep his heart behind the walls of simplicity. Not because he doesn't feel, but because he feels too much and has learned that few can truly hear what he means. When he finally dares to speak,